The blue light of my phone illuminated my hospital room at 2:17 a.m. I remember checking the time twice, wondering who would text me in the middle of the night. The doctors had just confirmed stage 3 breast cancer hours earlier. My body was still processing the cocktail of medications they'd pumped into me after the biopsy. This disease is proof you finally got what you deserve. I can't do this. Don't contact me. 16 words. That's all it took for Thomas to end our 8-year marriage while I lay in a hospital bed, still nauseous from anesthesia. No call, no conversation, just 16 words that burned into my retinas as I read them over and over, thinking there must be some mistake. I called him immediately, straight to voicemail. I texted back. No response. I emailed. Nothing. By morning, his side of the closet was empty, his passport gone, and his wedding ring left on our bathroom counter like some cruel parting gift. The surgeon visited my room around 9 a.m., her face professionally composed as she explained my treatment options. I nodded at appropriate intervals, but all I could think was, my husband believes I deserve cancer. Mrs. Richardson, do you have someone who can drive you home today? She asked gently. I almost laughed. Thomas had been my emergency contact, my designated driver, my person for nearly a decade. Now he was gone. I'll call a friend, I lied, already calculating which rideshare service would be cheapest for the 30-minute drive back to my empty house. That first night alone, I curled into a ball on our king-sized bed, phone clutched in my hand, waiting for the text that never came. The one saying it was all a terrible mistake, a moment of panic, a cruel joke. Instead, divorce papers arrived 3 days later via courier. The timing was almost comical. I was reviewing chemotherapy protocols when the doorbell rang. The delivery man asked for my signature with the same bored expression he probably used for Amazon packages. I wonder now if he knew he was handing me the demolition notice for my entire life. Thomas had checked all the boxes for irreconcilable differences. He wanted nothing from our joint assets except his personal belongings and his grandmother's antique watch collection. His lawyer had included a note suggesting we make this as painless as possible, as if anything about cancer and abandonment could be painless. My oncologist prescribed anti-anxiety medication when I showed up to my first chemo consultation with bloodshot eyes and trembling hands. The stress won't help your healing process, she said, scribbling on her prescription pad. Have you considered joining one of our support groups? I hadn't. The thought of sitting in a circle sharing my double tragedy seemed unbearable. How do you tell a room full of brave cancer fighters that your husband deemed you unworthy of basic human decency? That while they had partners holding their hands through treatment, mine had decided my illness was some cosmic punishment I deserved? My sister Abigail flew in from Seattle the following week. She took one look at me, 15 pounds lighter, divorce papers untouched on the kitchen counter, unwashed hair, and moved in temporarily. He's always been a coward, she said, aggressively chopping vegetables for soup I couldn't taste. But this is beyond anything I imagined him capable of. What she didn't say, what nobody said, was that they'd all seen the cracks in our marriage long before my diagnosis. Thomas's gradual emotional withdrawal, the separate vacations, the way he'd flinch when I touched him unexpectedly. I'd attributed it to work stress, to his childhood trauma, to anything but the obvious truth. He'd been looking for an exit strategy, and my cancer gave him the perfect opportunity. The day before my first chemotherapy session, a package arrived from Thomas's mother, Eleanor. Inside was a cashmere blanket and a card that read, "He doesn't speak for all of us. Call if you need anything." No mention of her son's actions, no condemnation, just a soft blanket and a tepid offer of conditional support. I threw the blanket in the donation pile and deleted Eleanor's number from my phone. During that first brutal round of chemo, as the poison designed to save me coursed through my veins, I made a decision. I wouldn't just survive cancer. I would emerge from this crucible transformed. Not because Thomas deserved to see me thrive, but because I deserved to experience life without the weight of his indifference. Your white blood cell count is concerning, my oncologist said during my follow-up. We need to be vigilant about infection. I nodded, mentally adding it to the growing list of threats to my existence. Cancer, loneliness, financial ruin from medical bills my insurance only partially covered. The whispers had already started at my workplace. Compassionate leave could only last so long before becoming a liability. That night, scrolling through social media despite Abigail's warnings not to, I saw it. Thomas, tanned and smiling on a beach in Bali with a woman I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Sometimes life gives you a second chance at happiness." I hurled my phone against the wall with such force the screen shattered, much like everything else in my life. The chemotherapy transformed me physically before I had time to process the emotional wreckage. My hair, once my pride with its thick chestnut waves, came out in clumps during a shower. I watched it circle the drain, remembering how Thomas used to run his fingers through it, claiming it was what first attracted him to me at that charity gala where we met. "It'll grow back," the nurse practitioner said during my next treatment, her eyes kind but clinical. "Many patients say it comes back thicker." What she didn't mention was how naked you feel without it, how vulnerable, how the world suddenly treats you differently, with either excessive pity or visible discomfort. Cancer becomes your identity, overriding everything else you ever were. 6 weeks into treatment, Thomas's lawyer contacted me about finalizing the divorce. I signed the papers in the hospital waiting room before my third round of chemo, my new pixie-cut wig slightly askew. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was fighting for my life while legally ending a relationship I once thought would last forever. Financial reality hit hard that same week. The medical bills began arriving with alarming frequency, each one more staggering than the last. Insurance covered 80%, but 20% of astronomical is still devastating. Our joint savings, which Thomas had mostly cleared out before leaving, wouldn't last through my treatment plan. "You should call him," my mother suggested during one of her awkward weekly calls. "He has a moral obligation to help." "No, Mom. He made his choice." But the vows, in sickness and in health, apparently came with fine print I missed. I interrupted, too exhausted to mask my bitterness. What hurt most wasn't just Thomas's abandonment. It was how quickly our shared community recalibrated around his narrative. Our couple friends began taking sides, most gravitating toward him, the healthy, functional one who just couldn't handle it, rather than the sick, needy woman who represented their worst fears. Even my colleague Rachel, whom I'd considered a close friend, texted, "I had dinner with Thomas and Christina last night. He seems really happy. I hope that's okay to share." As if his happiness were relevant to my survival. As if I should celebrate his swift recovery from our marriage while I fought actual death. The cruelest betrayal came from my father-in-law, Richard. He'd always treated me like the daughter he never had, calling me sunshine and bringing me obscure history books he thought I'd enjoy. 3 months after Thomas left, I ran into Richard at the pharmacy while picking up my medications. His eyes widened in shock at my appearance. The weight loss, the pallor, the too bright scarf covering my bare scalp. For a moment, I thought he might embrace me. Instead, he muttered something about being late for an appointment and hurried past, pretending not to see me call his name. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. "This is Eleanor. Richard told me he saw you. Please understand this is difficult for everyone. Thomas is our son." I stared at those words until they blurred. Difficult for everyone. As if my cancer were an inconvenience for their family. As if Thomas being their son somehow justified abandoning a sick spouse. As if blood trumped basic humanity. I blocked the number. My sister found me sobbing in the bathroom that night, curled against the cold tile floor. "I gave everything to this family," I whispered through tears. I planned their anniversaries. I remembered their birthdays. I listened to Richard's boring golf stories and ate Eleanor's terrible casseroles. I was the one who convinced Thomas to reconcile with them after that stupid fight about their vacation home. And now they're acting like I'm nothing, like I never existed. Abigail held me until the sobs subsided, then helped me back to bed. "They don't deserve you," she said firmly. "None of them do." The next morning, my oncologist delivered unexpected news. The cancer wasn't responding to the treatment protocol as hoped. We needed to try something more aggressive, an experimental trial at Stanford that showed promise for cases like mine. Insurance won't cover experimental treatments, I said numbly, already calculating the impossible mathematics. Let me worry about that, she replied, her determination momentarily overshadowing my despair. You focus on getting strong enough for the trial. That afternoon, I received another blow. My company's HR director called to discuss my situation. Despite their initially supportive stance, they needed to fill my position. They offered a modest severance package with continued health insurance for 6 months, a gesture that was simultaneously generous and utterly insufficient. I sat in my living room after the call, surrounded by the life Thomas and I had built together, the wedding photos I hadn't yet taken down, the furniture we'd chosen together, the books with both our marginalia intertwined. Everything felt like a monument to naive hope. My phone pinged with a LinkedIn notification. Thomas had been promoted to senior investment director at his firm. The post had over 200 congratulatory comments, including several from people who had sent me thinking of you text messages but never actually visited. That night, scrolling through Thomas's social media, a self-destructive habit I couldn't break, I discovered he and Christina had moved in together. Their new penthouse overlooked Central Park. The photo showed them toasting with champagne, her hand casually displaying a diamond that wasn't an engagement ring but might as well have been. The caption read, "Home is wherever I'm with you." I remembered when he'd said those exact words to me, the night we closed on our first house. The parallel was too perfect to be coincidental. He was rewriting our history, replacing me in our shared narrative with meticulous precision. That night, feverish from treatment and emotionally raw, I drafted an email to Thomas. I poured 8 years of love, 12 weeks of betrayal, and an ocean of pain into those paragraphs. I detailed every moment he missed, the nurse who held my hand during biopsies, the stranger who helped me when I vomited in a parking lot, the nights I woke up terrified and alone. My finger hovered over send for nearly an hour before I deleted every word. He didn't deserve my pain. He hadn't earned the right to witness my suffering. And more importantly, I suddenly realized I didn't need him to acknowledge what he'd done. I needed to save myself. The Stanford trial required relocating to California for 6 months. My sister offered her guest room, but her Seattle apartment was too far from the treatment center. I needed to be in Palo Alto, where housing costs were astronomical, especially for someone newly unemployed with mounting medical debt. I'll figure something out, I told my oncologist, not believing my own words. That evening, while sorting through old papers to organize my financial situation, I found something I'd completely forgotten. A business card from Dr. Helena Mitchell, the biotech CEO I'd seated next to at a charity gala 3 years earlier. We'd hit it off immediately, talking for hours about everything from gene therapy to classic literature. She'd given me her personal card saying, "If you ever want to make a change, call me. I need people who think like you do." I'd kept the card out of politeness, never intending to use it. Thomas had discouraged the connection, saying it would be disloyal to my current company to pursue other opportunities. Now, staring at that embossed card, I wondered if loyalty had ever really been his concern. With nothing to lose, I composed an email to Dr. Mitchell, explaining my situation with brutal honesty. I didn't expect a response. Successful CEOs rarely check their own emails, and 3 years was a lifetime in the business world. To my shock, she replied within hours, "I remember you vividly. I'm so sorry for what you're going through. As it happens, our foundation funds several slots in that exact Stanford trial. Can you meet tomorrow? Virtual or in person, whatever you're up for." That meeting changed everything. Helena didn't offer pity, she offered partnership. Her company's charitable foundation would cover my trial participation, and she proposed something unexpected. Consulting work I could do remotely during my stronger days, analyzing research protocols from a patient perspective. "Your experience is valuable," she said, her voice firm through the video call. "And when you're through this, there's a place for you here if you want it." And for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt a flicker of something beyond survival. Possibility. My sister helped me sublet my house and pack essential belongings. The rest went into storage or donation piles. Dismantling the home Thomas and I had built felt both devastating and liberating, like amputating a gangrenous limb, painful but necessary for survival. The night before my flight to California, I received an email from Thomas's lawyer. He was engaged to Christina and wanted to purchase my half of our house at fair market value. The lawyer suggested a figure significantly below actual worth, citing the distressed nature of the sale and current market conditions. Instead of responding immediately, I forwarded the email to my new attorney, a shark-like woman Helena had recommended. "Let me handle this," she wrote back within minutes. "Focus on your health. That's your only job right now." California marked the beginning of my metamorphosis. The experimental treatment was brutal, worse than the standard chemotherapy in many ways. There were days I couldn't leave my bed in the small apartment Helena's foundation provided near the hospital. But there were also unexpected gifts in my new surroundings. The nurses in the trial unit became family. Fellow patients formed an unspoken brotherhood of shared experience. Helena visited weekly, bringing journals and novels instead of flowers that would die before I could enjoy them fully. She never stayed too long or expected conversation when I was too exhausted to speak. 3 months into treatment, something unexpected happened. The trial coordinator called with news. My tumors were responding dramatically to the treatment. "We're seeing reduction rates we rarely achieve this quickly," she explained, cautious optimism in her voice. That same week, my attorney informed me that Thomas had agreed to purchase our house at full market value, plus covering my legal fees. He didn't want the negative publicity, she explained with a satisfied smile. I may have mentioned his company's ethical investment portfolio and how abandoning a cancer-stricken wife might look to potential clients. The settlement gave me breathing room financially, but more importantly, it gave me power I hadn't felt since that text message in the hospital room. During my 6th month in California, while my body slowly reclaimed itself from both cancer and treatment, Helena introduced me to Marcus Sullivan, the lead investor in her company. He was visiting the lab to review their latest research I had helped refine through my consulting work. "So you're the brilliant analyst Helena won't stop talking about," he said, his handshake firm but careful, as if he understood my body was still fragile. "Your patient-centered protocol redesigns have changed how we're approaching our entire clinical program." Unlike the pity or discomfort I'd grown accustomed to, Marcus looked at me with genuine respect, not as a cancer patient, not as someone's discarded wife, but as a professional whose insights had value. We ended up talking for hours after the formal meeting concluded, about research ethics, patient autonomy, the failures of medical systems. He listened more than he spoke, a rarity in a man of his position and wealth. When he asked about my personal experience with cancer, it wasn't voyeuristic. It was analytical, seeking understanding. "Would you be interested in joining our patient advocacy board?" he asked as our conversation wound down. "It's a paid position, meets quarterly. Your perspective would be invaluable." I accepted without hesitation. It wasn't just the opportunity. It was the recognition that my suffering had given me expertise worth compensating. What I didn't know then was that Marcus had lost his first wife to breast cancer years earlier, that he had founded a research institute dedicated to developing treatments, that he would become not just my professional ally, but, eventually, something neither of us expected. As my body healed, so did my spirit. I rented a small house near Helena's company, accepted a formal position as patient experience director, and gradually built a life unrecognizable from the one I'd left behind. On the 1-year anniversary of my diagnosis, the day that had begun with Thomas's abandonment, I received unexpected news. My oncologist called personally. "Your scans are clear. Not just responding, clear. We'll continue monitoring, but as of today, there's no evidence of disease." I celebrated alone that evening, sitting on my small patio with a glass of wine I could finally taste again, watching the California sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossibly vivid. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Thomas. I heard about your recovery. We should talk." I stared at those words, feeling nothing but a distant curiosity. How had he heard? Why now? What could he possibly have to say that would matter? I placed my phone face down on the table without responding and returned to watching the sunset, making silent plans for a future that was suddenly, miraculously, mine again. 6 months after my all-clear scan, life had established a new rhythm. My role at Helena's company had expanded to include overseeing patient communication for all clinical trials. My relationship with Marcus had deepened from professional respect to genuine friendship, to something neither of us had anticipated, a careful, deliberate love built on shared values rather than desperate need. We married in a small ceremony overlooking the Pacific. No white dress or elaborate vows, just honest promises between two people who understood life's fragility. Helena was my maid of honor. My sister and her family flew in from Seattle. Even my oncologist attended, raising a toast to second chances of all kinds. Thomas remained a ghost I'd successfully exorcised until he appeared in the lobby of my office building one Tuesday afternoon. "Isabel," he said, rising from one of the sleek visitor chairs. "You look amazing." He was right about my appearance. My hair had indeed grown back thicker, with striking silver streaks that I chose not to dye. Regular yoga and California sunshine had restored my body's strength. Designer clothes, a luxury I could now afford, had replaced the ill-fitting wardrobe of my treatment days. What Thomas couldn't see was the titanium core that had formed inside me, stronger than any bone, more resilient than any muscle. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady. "I've been trying to reach you. Didn't you get my messages?" I had, dozens of them over recent months, each deleted without reading after the first. "I've been busy," I replied, gesturing toward the security guard hovering nearby. "This isn't a good time. Please, just coffee. 20 minutes. I came all this way." Something in his desperation piqued my curiosity. The Thomas I'd known never begged. He commanded, expected, received. "Fine. 20 minutes. There's a cafe across the street." Over ridiculously overpriced lattes, Thomas unraveled his story. Christina had left him 6 months ago, taking a substantial settlement. His drinking had spiraled afterward, leading to a catastrophic error at work that cost his clients millions. He'd been fired, his reputation in finance destroyed. His parents had finally cut him off after bailing him out repeatedly. "I lost everything," he concluded, eyes seeking sympathy. "And then I saw that article about you in Business Insider. Cancer survivor revolutionizes patient advocacy in biotech, with your picture alongside Marcus Sullivan. Do you know what that was like? To see you not just recovered, but thriving? Married to one of the wealthiest men in healthcare?" I sipped my coffee, letting his question hang in the air. "Probably similar to receiving a cancer diagnosis via text message from the person who vowed to stand by you," I finally replied. He flinched. "I was scared. I made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. And now you're here because I need help, Isabel. I've got nothing left. No job prospects with my reputation. I'm facing bankruptcy. My apartment is being foreclosed next month." There it was. Not contrition, but convenience. Not apology, but opportunity. "What exactly are you asking for?" I kept my voice neutral, curious to hear how he'd frame his request. "A second chance. A job in Marcus's organization. Something to get me back on my feet. You always said I was brilliant with numbers. I could work in the foundation or investment division." I laughed then, a genuine laugh of disbelief. "You abandoned me when I was dying, and now you want me to recommend you to my husband for employment?" "I know how it sounds," he said quickly. "But people make mistakes. You of all people understand second chances. Look at your life. You got one." "I didn't get a second chance, Thomas. I fought for every breath, every day, every opportunity while you were posting beach photos with your girlfriend. The difference between us isn't luck or forgiveness. It's character." His expression hardened. "So that's it? You're just going to watch me drown?" "No," I said, reaching into my bag. "I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve." I slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $50,000, a significant sum, but a fraction of what I could now afford. "This is a one-time payment. In exchange, you'll sign an agreement never to contact me again. My lawyer has the paperwork ready." 50,000? His voice rose indignantly. "That's nothing compared to what you and Sullivan have. I need a career, not charity. What you need isn't my concern anymore. This offer expires when I walk out that door." "You've changed," he said, his tone accusatory. "The Isabel I knew would never be this cold. The Isabel you knew died the night you texted her in the hospital. Cancer killed her. You killed her. The woman sitting across from you now is someone else entirely. Someone who doesn't owe you anything." As I stood to leave, he grabbed my wrist. "Wait, I'll take it. The money. I'll sign whatever you want." I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me. "My lawyer will contact you. Don't come to my office again." Walking back to work, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because I'd helped Thomas. The money meant nothing to me now. But because I'd finally closed that chapter without compromising who I'd become. That evening, I told Marcus about the encounter. He listened without interruption, then asked simply, "Are you okay?" "Better than okay," I answered truthfully. I think I needed that confrontation to realize how completely I've moved on. What I didn't tell Marcus was about the second envelope in my bag, the one I hadn't given Thomas. It contained medical records proving my cancer had likely been developing for years before diagnosis, including during a period when Thomas had insisted I was imagining symptoms and refused to support additional testing. I'd discovered this while reviewing my medical timeline for a research project. The revelation had initially devastated me. Earlier intervention might have meant less aggressive treatment, but eventually, I'd found peace with this knowledge. Some truths serve no purpose once the damage is done. 3 days later, my lawyer confirmed Thomas had signed the non-contact agreement and cashed the check. "He asked if there might be more in the future," she reported with a raised eyebrow. "There won't be," I assured her. That chapter was finally, completely closed. The following month, Helena's company announced a breakthrough in our clinical trials. A treatment protocol I'd helped develop showed unprecedented response rates in previously resistant cancers. The stock soared, and with it, the value of the shares I'd been granted as part of my compensation. At the celebration dinner, surrounded by colleagues who had become friends, Helena raised her glass to Isabel, who turned personal tragedy into scientific triumph. "The patients who will benefit from this discovery may never know your name, but they'll carry your legacy in their survival." Later that night, as Marcus and I walked along the beach near our home, he asked what I was thinking. "About full circles," I replied. "How sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you're meant to become." He squeezed my hand. "Are you happy with what you became?" I stopped to watch the waves crashing against the shore, powerful, relentless, transformed by every obstacle they encountered. Completely. 2 years after Thomas cashed my check, I received a clipping from a small Midwest newspaper. No return address, but I recognized Eleanor's handwriting on the envelope. The article detailed Thomas's Community Service Award for his work at a cancer support nonprofit in Minnesota. The accompanying photo showed a thinner, more humble-looking Thomas surrounded by cancer patients. According to the article, he'd founded the organization using his personal savings after losing someone special to the disease. I should have been angry at the fiction he'd created, the convenient narrative that transformed his abandonment into noble inspiration. Instead, I felt an unexpected peace. Perhaps, in his way, Thomas had found redemption. Not for my forgiveness, but for his own healing. I never responded to Eleanor's implicit olive branch. Some broken connections are better left unmended. My own life continued its upward trajectory. The patient advocacy model I developed became industry standard, implemented across dozens of pharmaceutical companies. Marcus and I expanded the foundation's work to include financial support for cancer patients facing bankruptcy from medical costs. Helena's company went public, transforming my equity into wealth beyond anything I'd imagined in my previous life. But true richness came in unexpected forms. The young woman who approached me after a medical conference, saying my patient communication protocols had made her mother's final months dignified and clear. The oncology nurse who implemented my advocacy training and reported reduced anxiety scores across her entire patient population. The researcher who revised a painful biopsy procedure based on feedback channels I'd established. On the 5th anniversary of my diagnosis, Marcus surprised me with keys to a small building near the hospital where I'd received treatment. "What's this?" I asked, turning the unfamiliar keys in my palm. "Your next chapter, if you want it." The building was perfect for what I'd been quietly planning. A comprehensive support center for cancer patients navigating both medical and life challenges during treatment. Legal aid for those facing employment discrimination. Financial advisors specializing in medical debt. Counselors trained in both individual therapy and couples counseling for relationships strained by illness. We named it Phoenix House, not just for the symbolism of rising from ashes, but for my hospital room number, Phoenix 417, where I'd received that life-shattering text years earlier. At the grand opening, surrounded by survivors, medical professionals, and supporters, I shared my story publicly for the first time. The abandonment, the financial devastation, the rebuilding. Cancer shows you who people really are, I told the gathered crowd, both the ones who leave and the ones who show up. But more importantly, it shows you who you really are and who you can become when everything familiar is stripped away. Afterward, a woman approached me, her headscarf marking her as a current patient. "My husband left 2 weeks after my diagnosis," she whispered. "I thought I was the only one." "You're not alone," I assured her, squeezing her hand. "And this isn't the end of your story." That night, Marcus found me on our deck, staring at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "I was thinking about that text," I admitted. "How Thomas said cancer was proof I got what I deserved. He couldn't have been more wrong." "Actually," I said slowly, "in a strange way he was right, just not how he meant it. Cancer gave me exactly what I deserved, but not as punishment. It gave me truth. It showed me who would stand beside me and who wouldn't. It forced me to build something new when the old foundation crumbled." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if he had stayed? If he'd been the partner he promised to be?" I considered the question carefully. I'd probably still be living a half-life, accepting less than I deserved, missing the impact I could make. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you saves you from something far worse, a lifetime of invisible compromise. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the night sky. I no longer felt the need to fill every moment with words or activity, another gift of facing mortality. Last month, I received a final, unexpected communication related to Thomas. His mother sent a brief note informing me of his engagement to a woman he'd met through his nonprofit work, a cancer survivor herself. The note ended with, "He learned the hard way what matters. Thank you for the lesson that changed him." I didn't respond, but I did make an anonymous donation to his organization in the exact amount of the check I'd given him years earlier. Not for Thomas, but for the patients who would benefit from whatever good he managed to create from the wreckage of his former self. My oncologist still monitors me annually, though she's now more colleague than doctor. At my last checkup, she asked if I ever regretted being so public about my experience. "Never," I answered honestly. Silence protects the wrong people. As I approached the 7th anniversary of that text message, the words that both ended and began my life, I sometimes marvel at how completely tragedy can transform into triumph. Not through toxic positivity or spiritual platitudes, but through the raw, unglamorous work of rebuilding with better materials. Thomas was right. I got exactly what I deserved. Not cancer, but the clarity that came with it. The chance to discover my own strength. The opportunity to help others find theirs. And most importantly, the wisdom to recognize that sometimes the most devastating rejection makes space for the most perfect acceptance. Of yourself, by yourself, for yourself. That's a diagnosis